We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
What legacy will President Joe Biden leave behind? And can America survive another 4 years of Bidenomics? Well, that's what we'll be looking into in today's edition of Liberty Nation Radio right here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We'll be speaking to one of America's best thinkers, Bill Walton, on the state of American politics and the economy, and a whole lot more besides. It's going to be quite the show. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Presidents are all too often concerned with legacies, whether this is in the form of a presidential library or lasting economic and cultural changes. The commander-in-chief is determined to have something positive in the pages of the history books. But what of President Joe Biden, the one-time unity candidate? Now, there's a question not frequently asked, just 18 months into a White House occupation. We're fortunate to be joined today by someone who's always delivered a unique and respected opinion on such matters, a giant in the field of money, culture, politics, and human flourishing. Mr. Bill Walton, host of the fantastic Bill Walton Show. Thank you for taking the time to join us, Bill.
Mark, great talking with you.
Now, let's start with the economics angle, if I may. How do you think things are going presently, and further removed from the moment? Do you think the Biden administration will be able to claim any successes looking back?
Well, if his idea of success is wrecking the United States economy, I think he's been very successful.
That's pretty much the metric everybody's basing it on.
We now have inflation approaching 10% annually, and most people think it's much higher. But gas prices are twice what they were when he took office. We've got him over in Saudi Arabia right now, hat in hand, although I saw a mocked-up photograph with gas can in hand begging the Saudis for oil. He's put the United States in a position that we were not in 18 months ago. And, I think when he starts thinking about legacy, he's 18 months into a 4-year term, and I don't see any signs that he's going to get this turned around because, he's a true believer. I think we forget that Joe Biden ran on getting rid of fossil fuels, eliminating fossil fuels, and we thought he was joking. We thought he was playing to his base. Well, it turns out he wasn't, and what he's done so far has been very, very successful by his own standards, but not by most of the rest of us.
It does seem a bit of a conundrum that fossil fuels from Saudi Arabia, good. Fossil fuels drilled back home, bad.
Well, of course it is. And, Trump made the United States energy independent. In fact, we became a net exporter, and that's a great place to be when you realize that fossil fuels provide 80% of the energy the world uses and is really the basis for a civilization. Now, is it a good idea over time to morph into something like wind and solar? Maybe. Depends on who you ask. But we can't get there in 2 years. We can't get there in 10 years. We can't get there in 30 years. So we've got to be smarter about this. And in fact, they've been quite dumb.
It certainly seems so. And what we have with that, I think, is there's a certain ascendancy of other nations in terms of economic growth. And I guess more specifically, the ability to produce things that America seems either unwilling or unable under the present government to actually do. Is there room, do you think, for a United States that prides itself on manufacturing in the future, or like oil and gas, is this set to be a very foreign affair?
Well, we're paying the price for a foreign policy consensus that started 30 years ago or more when we wanted to bring China into the world trade system. And the theory was we'll make China more prosperous, and therefore they will become more democratic, and therefore they'll become more like us, and we'll have a great world. Well, it didn't exactly happen that way. People forgot to check in with the Chinese Communist Party, who had other plans. Deng, who was president in 1992, now it's known, was whispering to people, we have a let's see, a bide and abide strategy, which is what they're going to be doing is developing their manufacturing capability to the point where they dominate world manufacturers, and then when they succeed, they can reclaim their rightful place in the world. Remember, China is a thousands of year old civilization, and they see themselves as the pinnacle of civilization, not us. So we find ourselves now where the United States is completely dependent upon China for pharmaceuticals manufacturing, from a lot of microprocessing pieces. Of course, apples are almost entirely manufactured or fabricated in China. For Apple, China is it's one of its largest customers, about 20-25% of the iPhone market. And so this this problem didn't start with Biden. He certainly exacerbated it, but America needs to be thinking very much about getting control of our own manufacturers again, so we're truly independent.
Is that even possible, do you think, Bill? Bear in mind that I think you mentioned on a recent show on the Bill Walton show that at the moment America doesn't even produce aspirin. Is it possible to revamp American industrialism?
Well, with America, if we have political will, if we have consensus, we can begin to move in that direction. It's unbelievably complicated now, though, because we've been working on interconnecting our supply chains for 10, 15, 20 years. And so, as you point out, something as simple as aspirin, including also antibiotics, the pharmaceutical companies have outsourced that manufacturing to China. Bringing it back here will take decades, really, I think, if you want to do it comprehensively. And that's just one piece of our manufacturing conundrum. But there are a lot of companies who are recognizing that China is no longer an economic competitor. China seems to have declared itself an outright enemy. And so they're doing their planning. We're thinking about factories here, but it will take a decade or two if we really want to achieve anything that approximates economic independence.
So, sorry to carry on down the same path here, because I think energy independence is key to everything. And as you rightly point out, for at least several months of Trump's last proper year in office, the United States was energy independence, and that was a trend that was improving at the time until Joe Biden's fateful promise to end fossil fuels.
The energy piece is the easiest piece for us, I believe. I mean, we can do some simple things like turn back on the gas pipelines, reopening federal lands for drilling, setting up, turning a green light on for regulations so people can frack and produce the energy that we're capable of producing. And so we could actually turn that one around, I think, within a year or two. But we've got to have the political will to do it. And right here in D.C., the federal government headquarters here, the mayor, the city council in D.C. just banned natural gas. That's a good idea.
Allegedly.
As Wayne would say, not.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of stupidity among the political class, but the energy piece, I believe, is by far the easiest one to turn around, and as you pointed out, the most important.
So with the manufacturing, I guess that would require, as you point out, a steady, dedicated effort to bring manufacturing back to the United States. But that would require some continuity of vision within government, wouldn't it? And that seems very unlikely to happen, especially with how polarized the vision for the future of America is between the two parties.
Well, it's not only government, but I think we have to have a consensus with my friends on Wall Street and the CEOs of the large multinational companies based here in the U.S. I mean, for decades now, they've been assiduously moving manufacturing offshore to bring about lower prices, among other reasons. And they've got to start thinking in terms of an America First strategy, but most of them, unfortunately, have moved into the world of the Davos elites, and they don't necessarily see themselves as Americans first. They see themselves as part of the global economic elite. we've got some work to do. We've got to start, that's part of the reason you and I are talking, is I think we need to have everybody thinking about getting American headquartered companies thinking about our strategic interests first. We saw this with the lockdowns, or when the pandemic, the virus broke out in February, March of 2020. We found ourselves dependent on the Chinese for aspirin, antibiotics. We talked about it, but there was an open debate in China about whether they wanted to sell it to us. So anybody paying attention to that realizes how vulnerable we are. So I think we need to start working on a consensus that particularly for essential things like that, we need to bring it back, and we need to put pressure on these CEOs of these big companies to do just that.
We're talking with Bill Walton on the Biden legacy and the state of America. We'll be right back after this short break, talking the death of political compromise. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.